Sagicor e-advantage. Bank with ease, as you please, like a breeze. Pay no fees, rain or shine, save your time. It's so fine when you bank online.
Finally, there's a savings account that meets your need for speed and ease. Sagicor Bank e-advantage. Bank online, no monthly fees, unlimited free Sagicor Bank ABM withdrawals, interest on your money. Sagicor Bank e-advantage.
It's so fine when you bank online.
Open your Sagicor Bank e-advantage account today.
Hello everyone, my name is Novia MacDonald-White and welcome to Jamaica Observer's webinar. Today, the Unplug Collective, a celebration of black women and non-binary people at their realest, powered by Sagicor, Digicel and Carreras Limited. It's not every day that you get the opportunity to take out the crystal ball and look at the future. And trust me, today we have that privilege, at least I do, and I really am totally excited to welcome Amanda Taylor, founder and CEO of the Unplug Collective, Zara Harding, Vice President, the Unplug Collective, Aisha Sheriff, Chief Marketing Officer, Sarah D'Souza, the Content Editor, and Leah James, the Copy Editor. Our webinar, powered by Sagicor, Digicel, and Carreras, starts now.
Hi, I'm Amanda Taylor, and I'm the founder of the Unplug Collective. The Unplug Collective is a digital platform, magazine, and community that, fosters communication through Instagram.
Hi, I'm Zara and I'm the Vice President of the Unplug Collective, and as VP I'm just really invested in helping to create a world where women can heal together.
We want to kind of open up what storytelling looks like, what journalism looks like really, and give people the option to write on their Google Docs or their notepad and just share that directly with us on their email. We also do a lot of educational content, so a lot of historical things that people just didn't know, or a lot of mental health terminology and ideas that people may not be aware of, because we think that in order to really get as many people as possible to share their stories, we also have to make information accessible. And because social media is such a easy platform, most people use Instagram, we felt like we should use a space that can generally be toxic to create something healing and helpful.
Sometimes, says Amanda Taylor, founder and CEO of the Unplug Collective, friendships are where you find your voice, especially if you've been raised to believe that women should be seen, but not heard. Amanda Taylor, welcome.
I'm Amanda, the CEO and founder, and
Sorry, we're not hearing you properly, Amanda. We might have to ask you to start again. Please go ahead.
Can you guys hear me now?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, so sorry. So yes, hi, thank you so much for having us. I'm Amanda, the CEO and founder of the Unplug Collective, and I started Unplug as a way to tell stories in an accessible and free way. So there's no formal pitching process. All I did was put a link in my Instagram bio inviting Black women and non-binary people to share their stories. And soon enough, we had an entire publication, and now this amazing team can tell you a lot about what we do.
Thank you. Zara Harding, Vice President, the Unplug Collective. Welcome, Zara.
Hi, thank you for having us. So I'm Zara, I'm the Vice President, and basically the work that I do with Unplug is a lot of team management and just making sure that we stay grounded with each other, and making sure that we really practice what we preach, because it's what we love to do on the team is make sure that the energy of the page, the healing energy, the affirmation, the support is something that we really foster with each other. So the work that I do is a lot of just making sure that people are able to express themselves. You know, if there are any issues or however they're feeling, that can always come up, and any grievances are always dealt with, and we just really like work to make sure that we support each other, and we're actually like friends. Like we became really good friends with each other through doing this work if we weren't friends already. So the work that we actually do to put in to make Unplug what it is heals us and allows us to support each other as well.
Thank you. Welcome, Aisha.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having us. I run marketing for Unplug, which has been an amazing experience. I'm actually very new to the team. I'm the newest member. And what it encompasses is sort of how can we reach a lot more people? How can we reach a lot more Black women and sort of say that we see you, we hear you, and this is a page for you where you can feel comfortable expressing how you feel in your stories. And what's been really rewarding about doing marketing for Unplug is because we're setting our own standards and our own rules, and we're less focused on the metrics and the conventions and creating something new that we hope other people will then follow, of creating sort of a new form of storytelling and journalism.
Thank you. Welcome, Sarah D'Souza, the content editor.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us again. I'm Sarah. I'm the content editor. Part of my job, I came to Unplug as a writer. And as a Black woman, it's so much easier to just kind of write like I'm writing and not really worry about who's going to see it. So part of what I love about my job is just being able to work with writers who feel pretty much the same way, and just being able to write and support them as they process their healing, because we encourage our writers not to have a conclusion to our pieces. So it's me there to support them as we just go through it together.
Thank you. Leah James, copy editor.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. Over a year ago, I was an enthusiastic supporter of this dream that Amanda had. I was interested in the stories that she was sharing and the way that she was doing it. I thought it was this great idea. And so when she started receiving more submissions, she asked me to join her as an editor. And here I am. I mean, a huge part of the process for us isn't just other people hearing their stories and knowing that they aren't alone. The process starts from the moment someone decides to send us a pitch or write us a first draft. Healing from trauma and from uncomfortable experiences starts with naming those experiences. And so as an editor, I help to bring those experiences to light and help people to share them in a way that allows them to express their story in the manner that reaches the most people.
Okay, I'm going to sit back now. Amanda, over to you.
Yes. So I think, as Leah kind of just said, naming things that you're going through is something that's really difficult. Of course, me, Leah, and Zara, or Zara, Leah, and I were all raised in Jamaica. Sarah has Guyanese parents, right? And Aisha has West African heritage. So we all kind of grew up in this environment, as you kind of said, Novia, that kind of said, speak when you're spoken to. And I think that's really a global thing for women. I was lucky enough, and I think a lot of us on this team were lucky enough to have parents who kind of allowed us to push back against that idea and allowed us to show up as we are and be our entire selves. But when you go out into the world and you're constantly silenced in these different ways, it can be really difficult to know how to circumvent that. What do you do to heal from situations where you've been shut down, situations where you weren't able to express yourself? And so for me, the only solution I knew is, let's give people a voice to actually express what they're going through. And social media for our generation, Gen Z, is a place that we're always on. It's a place that's free technically, and it's a place where we could just transcend boundaries. Like, we literally want to change the world. We literally want to change the way that people publish, that people interact, that people react. And we are now at a point where we're doing this in every way that we possibly can, with photo shoots, with writing, with campaigns. And so it's just amazing to have a team that understands that. I don't know if anyone else wants to kind of speak to.
Before somebody else comes in, Amanda, a question. They're coming in fast and furious already. From a Miss Jackson. Can the team give us more of an explanation of the word healing that has been referred to quite a lot thus far? That's one. And also from Jackie McDonald Davis, can you say a bit more about the narratives coming in? How have you gelled as a team?
Does anyone want to respond, or do you want?
I think Leah and I can maybe talk a little bit about the narratives if someone else wants to talk about the first question.
Sure. Okay, well, I can get started. I can talk about this idea of storytelling.
Thank you.
So Unplug, of course, is a product of how we were all raised. You know, like Amanda said, Shizara and I are Jamaican born and raised. Aisha has West African heritage. Sarah has Guyanese roots. And while I can only speak to my own experience, of course, I know that each of us grew up with storytelling as somehow a key component of our upbringing. You know, some of us would go to church every Sunday and hear testimonies. Some of us would spend endless evenings at family dinners, Sunday dinner, hearing stories passed down for generations and generations. So for Unplug, we are telling stories that we don't get to tell at the dinner table, that we don't get to tell at family dinner, etc. You know, this is the power that we want to give people. That's the voice Amanda is talking about. You know, we can go back then to the dinner table, back to church, and feel empowered to take those stories back to our roots and change minds there.
Definitely. I think also, like Amanda mentioned, like healing is something that we talk about a lot, but it's also like hard to name those things when you don't actually know what you're feeling. So I think, like, in terms of questions about like what narratives are coming in, part of what makes Unplugged so special is people are allowed to talk about things, not having a conclusion, but also talk about things and not knowing the name for something and working through that with editors, with the team. Like, we're all there working with them through every step of the process to help them work through whatever they're feeling in a way that, like, a lot of spaces we don't have that, especially like using social media as a tool, something that can be super toxic. A way to allow people to get information, absorb it, understand, and see stories of others that are going through something similar, and knowing that there is a name to what they're also experiencing, I think is something that's really important.
A question has come in. I'm not too sure if Sarah, you want to hold on to it because you're the content editor, from Donette Chinloy. New journalism. What is the criteria to publish other people's stories, quality, appropriateness, and other tenets of journalism? Or are you recreating that too?
I think what got me so excited to be a part of this team is something that Amanda had said earlier when we discussed, was just like what Unplug is trying so hard to do is democratize journalism, like something that is so hard. I'm also a writer, and something that is so hard is just like reaching out and pitching yourself to editors that are in this huge positions of power and will quickly reject you just because they get so many pitches. Part of what we do at Unplug is just trying to make sure that people get to tell their story, no matter what way it comes into us at the first. We try to prioritize, if you see our website and like look at previous posts, we try to prioritize starting with your personal experience and working outward from that. So I think something that we try to do at least is not say no to a lot of people and just allow them to tell their story in the way that it's most comfortable for them and work with them to tell that in a way that works.
There's another question. Is Unplug a sisterhood? Are there fees paid for such association? And that's coming from Durangela. She also wants to know how does one become a customer of such an experience?
That is actually the stage that we're at right now, because we do work literally for free, and we are working all day, all night. So we'd love to kind of have, you know, some kind of customer experience, but we just are trying to figure out what that is going to look like, because we don't want to extract money from our, you know, community when a lot of our community are young people who are trying to get on their feet still, you know. So we have it's been recommended to us so many times to do like a membership program where people pay, you know, once per month, and we've been very, very hard on saying no. Like a lot of, you know, and I can go back to the first question, which was what is healing, because I think that's really important in this. Zara is the one who's the psych major, so she can definitely speak a lot more to this. But psychologists say that, you know, the first 3 steps to healing, or some of the steps to healing, are naming it, feeling it, and sharing it, right? And that is separate from, you know, the context of storytelling. That's just in your everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
When you've gone through something difficult, the only way to actually move forward from it is to say, what did I go through? And to like actually say out loud, I just went through something difficult. And so with storytelling, you're literally naming it, because you have to make a title for the story, you know. And if you even go on our website, you'll see, which is, you know, www.theunplugcollective.com, you'll see that the titles are very to the point. It's like, you know, this was my life growing up as X, or, you know, this is how, you know, there's a title that says, you know, how America made me feel like I should be white from 6,000 miles away. And it talks about, you know, how growing up and watching American TV introduced this person who grew up in Nigeria to the Western world. And it made her feel like she should have an American accent. It made her, you know, it made her not like parts of herself by virtue of only seeing one kind of representation on TV. And I think we underestimate the, you know, that's just one small example of how every single day kind of the, you know, media that we're inhaling and the just way of life, everything, like the way that we have to exist in this world, it does bring up things that we need to talk about. And so simply naming them, feeling it, because you actually have to go through the process with the writers, with the editors. They actually, Sarah and Leah are amazing. They actually call people on the phone. They say like, how are you? They really prioritize the person behind the story and not the story itself.
Right.
And then they share it.
A question has come in on my phone from Ashley Foster. It was, I think this came from Leah. Leah mentioned that these are conversations that can't be had at the dinner table. The question Ashley's asking is, why not? How will societal thinking and levels of acceptance evolve if we don't have these conversations at the dinner table?
Maybe I was misunderstood.
Okay.
What I was saying is that, you know, growing up, oftentimes people may feel silenced, although that's not the energy that a family or a dinner table conversation might be fostering. Some people might just not feel empowered to say their piece at the dinner table. So what we want to do at Unplug is to have that kind of conversation here in a space that feels potentially safer to people in terms of sharing their ideas, so that they can feel empowered, and we encourage them and we empower them to then turn around, share those stories back at the dinner table, so that we can generate that kind of conversation within the family, within the household, within those types of spaces.
Thank you. A suggestion on monetizing what you do from Donette Chinloy. Monetize eventually and part proceeds to scholarships or a cause you choose. Another question perhaps, which stories are being told and how does it benefit the storyteller afterwards? Are there follow-ups, especially for those stories that posit trauma? Feel free, anybody, to respond.
I can take this one. So basically the whole focus, as Leah and Sarah have shared with the writing process is going through experiences with someone in detail. Even just the writing process in general, being able to put into words something that you've experienced is really powerful, just to know in yourself what that experience was. And then the part about it that's really affirming is once stories get published, the community that we have fostered on Instagram is really the power of Unplug. We have our website, obviously, that where all of the articles are housed, but we call ourselves like an Instagram magazine, because really the heart of Unplug is centered on Instagram, and that's where like the community itself is built. So like we recently have gained a lot more followers, and like the followers are highly engaged. So if you look at any of the posts, there's like a lot of comments on them. Once an article is shared, we basically have an entire community of people reading that article and saying, I see you, I've experienced something similar, I'm with you, I'm sharing in this with you, and I support you. And that happens publicly on our page, but also privately. A lot of the times when writers publish their stories, they'll get DMs from so many different people saying, this story was amazing, thank you so much for sharing this, you're so brave for putting this story out there and putting yourself on the internet in a really vulnerable way. And doing that, and even just having the experience of so many people, oftentimes strangers, coming to you and saying something that you experienced and that you shared, that you've been holding on to for so long, helped me in some way. And I relate to you, and I can really like, people really affirm and support each other in that way. So that's really like where the power of articles comes in. So there's the writing process of going through that with yourself and with the editor is sort of like an internal thing, and then once it gets shared and it's put out there publicly, then you get like the influx of support from like our entire community that we've built.
So when somebody like Tracy Ellis Ross gives you a shout out and shares, what's that like?
It's actually unreal. Like, Amanda can speak more to this, but there have been a number of times, especially in the month of June. June has just been like a ridiculous month for us in terms of growth and exposure and stuff. There's a lot of disbelief because obviously this started out in Amanda's dorm room. This started out as a small platform and a very close-knit community. So to see it sort of reaching a level where celebrities like Tracy Ellis Ross, Kylie Jenner, Bella Hadid are like posting our posts on their stories and writing comments about how they love this, and even DMing us. Tracy Ellis Ross DM'd us and said, I love what you guys are doing, keep it up. That kind of affirmation and just like reinforcement of what we're doing is completely unmatched to anything else. Like obviously, the support of our community and everything, but when you have like major personalities affirming that work, there's definitely moments of just complete shock where we're just in the group chat like, oh my God. I'm right now, like I can't believe what's going on. So like Amanda can say more about that, but it's amazing, honestly.
Let me ask Amanda this, because I didn't want to put you in the hot seat since it's coming from Zachary Harding, the question. How far are you ladies prepared, Amanda, to take this movement? Is it just a hobby in school, or are you devoted to this cause long term? I guess it could be an ROI moment there.
Zara and I talk about this all the time. Like, this is our life's work, because it's not just about healing. It's healing from specific things. It's healing from body discrimination, which we can talk more about. It's healing from mental health related issues. It's healing from the perfectionism that society requires of women to exist as these like perfect beings who have to express themselves perfectly and have to look perfect. And so there's just so many ways that we've been able to deconstruct that. And we feel like if we can continue to do this, if we can continue to give people a voice, we literally want to do this forever. I'm already thinking about like what our New York office is going to look like when we graduate. And so, yeah. on the right track, I think.
Stay right there, Amanda. An observation and a question. It sounds like an individual having a compassionate conversation with themselves and then sharing it with others. Is that correct? This is from Jackie McDonald Davis.
That's such a beautiful way to describe it, yes.
Okay, another question here. The Me Too movement is back on the table, particularly in Jamaica. How is this reflected in the stories you get?
Okay, well, I can talk about receiving stories because as we've gotten more and more engagement on the platform, and as we've seen so many more stories in our inbox, it's remarkable to us that we're at a stage that we can say, I'm sorry, we're not able to post your story right now. You know, we're still learning to navigate what it means to be the kind of publication where we're not taking every single story. And especially in terms of, you know, things that are topical, things that people are healing from, it's important to us to emphasize how important the story is when it's being written and the process of it being written. Because of course we get a lot of stories and every single story deserves honor and deserves its own place, and it deserves a place to be shared. And the fact that, that we can't take every single story and share it with the world was something hard to come to terms with. But what we emphasize, especially when we receive very sensitive stories, stories of that nature, is sharing with the writer how important it is that they have even gone to that point that they are ready to share that story, and how many strides have been made that they're at that stage. And so we do receive a lot of stories to that effect. And even if we do not share them, we always emphasize how important it is that they are written, and we encourage them to be shared in other places.
Okay.
Just adding on to what Leah said, I think in terms of highlighting the Me Too movement as it has been ongoing since like 2017, 2016, I think we definitely do make a priority to share stories that we feel really need to be heard and people will see themselves in those. Recently, we published a story where a writer wrote about missing and murdered Indigenous Peoples Day. And that is a holiday that not a lot of people know unless they're an Indigenous woman or Indigenous person, something that maybe members in our community won't necessarily know about, so won't necessarily think about. And I think she talked really openly and bravely about her own experience with sexual assault. And that was something that, despite her own background being different from other members in the community, a lot of people could see themselves in it. So I think bringing that and putting it on the table and allowing other people, like we've mentioned before, to see themselves in a story, even if they're not ready to write something and send it in to us, maybe they're at least coming to terms with their own experience with sexual assault, sexual harassment, and being able to process that and heal from that. So whether or not they're choosing to share that and put that outline, because obviously that is a big ask, it's also just something for them to internally process and be able to see themselves in.
From Simi Chatani, what are your thoughts on how Jamaican culture plays into reactions to people from the LGBTQ community?
That's a really, really tough question. And I know, like, basically anyone watching this right now is like, ooh, how are they going to answer that one? But, you know, to be really honest, colonialism in Jamaica has a really big impact on the way that we understand ourselves and the world. And that's just a reality. For example, the buggery law that is still a thing in Jamaica, which you guys all know what it is, or you can Google it after. If not, was imposed by the British, globally and in all of the places that they colonized. And so I find it kind of ironic sometimes to see videos by publications in the UK coming to Jamaica to interview people and kind of shine a negative light on our culture and call our culture, quote unquote, like really homophobic, which obviously the LGBTQ community has a lot of struggles in Jamaica in terms of being heard and seen, but the origins of that homophobia literally come from partly colonialism. And so I think this really gets into a lot of our work. Like, where do our ideas come from? Where does certain trauma come from? And how is generational trauma or generational history, how does that affect how we understand ourselves today?
A question from Sam Williams. Anybody can take this. Can you explain what non-binary people mean to you and how they are treated, reflected on your page?
Sure. That's a great question. I can take that one. So at Unplug, we talk a lot about how there is no one way to be a woman. And despite this, many people have grown up feeling as though they're not, who they are does not fit at all within that gender binary of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, womanhood in general. And so on non-binary, the word itself implies a lack of conformity to that gender binary, that man-woman binary.
A question. The Indigenous female story is very much present in Canada, and there has been truth and reconciliation movement around this. I don't think the person finished the story, the question. I've just seen a bit of it. It might have gotten chopped off, so let me come back to that one. From Andrea Beckford, aside from written support from readers, is there any support given to these victims? Let's say suggestion, counseling, professional help, etc.
Yes, so it was super important for us to give some kind of tangible healing as well as writing. So we actually are so proud to announce that for the entire month of June, we were able to offer our community group therapy. So everyone had access to free group therapy through a company called Real, who is trying to completely reimagine what therapy looks like. And it was amazing because it was 2 Black women who were therapists, and with everything going on in the world right now, people being at home in quarantine needed to feel supported by people. Even just being on this call feels kind of like we're in a room together. So I think that was amazing. We also have a partnership with Talkspace that is still ongoing, which is another therapy company, which kind of does like unlimited messaging with therapists on an app. So I think the world is making strides towards healing in new ways that kind of benefit us, that make more sense to us, and we are a part of that.
Yeah, I'll leave you to put anything else on the table, since the questions came in fast and furious after you spoke, Amanda.
Yeah.
So it's back to you.
Yeah, I think a couple things kind of got lost. One of the things is that in response to the Me Too movement question, what's so amazing about Me Too, which by the way was started by a Black woman, Tarana Burke, is that it is naming an entire experience. And so often when women go through sexual assault, it is not until years later when they're reading other people's stories that they're able to say, wait, I think what I went through may have been assault. I just didn't know at the time. And it's because we, again, going back to what Leah says, we don't have these conversations frequently enough with each other to be able to kind of recognize when it's happening to ourselves. And so we did a video, and the hashtag was why I didn't report. And we had people send in from our community just explanations. Here's why I didn't report my sexual assault case. This is what happened when I did report, and why I didn't want to report the next time. And just having that video and having people comment and respond has been just another part of our mission, naming it, feeling it, sharing it.
Would somebody else like to add anything?
That was a really remarkable thing to add, because that process of creating the campaign, the Why I Didn't Report campaign, was very special to us because it was one of those things that we wanted to name and to show people that they do have a platform to tell that story. And of course, we come across stories like this, and we want to name stories like this that can be very difficult and can be very taxing. So maybe something for us to talk about now is to share how this very small team can manage these things that can be very difficult to talk about sometimes and can be very difficult to navigate. So I don't know if somebody wants to start off talking about just what the team means to you, you know, how we support each other, how we process things like a hashtag like why I didn't report, or different campaigns that we do.
I'd love to hear that as well, because a question came in earlier as to, you know, how do you gel as a team? How do you choose each other? How do you amplify your own voices? And then by extension, the letter writers.
I can talk about this. So we have weekly team meetings with the full team on Saturday, and then we also have like meetings throughout the week sporadically. And a lot of times when we have those meetings, we make sure to start it off not work related. So we might do check-ins. We'll have a question, you know, what's your favorite show that you're watching right now, or something that you're looking forward to in the next week, and we'll sort of go around and always kick off the meetings having just genuine conversation with each other as people. And through that, like, I've known Amanda since and Leo since middle school. We went to school together, and then like Sarah and Aisha came on the team a little bit later, and we've gotten to a point now where we're sort of all friends with each other because we make sure to facilitate those conversations where we're sort of like interacting with each other as friends. And you know, in terms of how we work together as a team, it's constant communication. So obviously when you have a group of people working together, there's a lot of different communication styles. And so like part of my job is making sure that all of, you know, everybody's different communication styles can kind of work together in the best way possible. So if two people aren't clicking in a particular way, then we work through that. There's never any like major issues really, because we're all here under the premise of supporting each other as people. And so we literally just like have the best conversations, like even when we're having work calls, because I mean we meet like so often, like almost every day. You know,
yeah,
we might
you
get
guys
sidetracked.
are very busy.
Yeah, we are. No, seriously, like we meet like every single day. But yeah, we make sure like we end up sidetracked and talking about other things and talking about, you know, current events and stuff that we're going through. And then we also make sure to have like particular self-care guidelines. So there was one meeting where we, you know, spent time writing out an entire document of like, okay, what are the actual strategies that we're going to use to take care of ourselves and each other? You know, if an article comes in about some kind of material that is, you know, potentially triggering for somebody on the team, there's a warning about that. And there's, okay, if this is a type of content that you don't really need to see right now, I can take it on. I'll take on the editing. I'll communicate with the writer, and the editors can speak more to that. And then also with the comments on the page, you know, we're discussing a lot of oftentimes controversial stuff on the page. And so we'll often get comments of people being really critical of certain things or having certain opinions, and that content can sometimes be triggering for people on the team. So, you know, making sure that we have a system in place to say, okay, this person will be on the comments monitoring for this 2 or 3 hour period, and making sure that as the comments come in, like we're getting rid of anything that, you know, might be harmful to anybody's mental health, both on the team and just like viewers. So there's a lot of like small systems that we have in place to make sure that we're taking care of each other. But the bottom line is that we all care about each other as people through doing this work. And so everything that we do really sort of like comes from that. Preserving the energy of the team is really important to us, and the mental health of our team members, because if we're not, you know, feeling the passion and feeling the energy and the drive behind this work, that's going to show through. And we always want to make sure that that energy of support and passion is on the page. So we always facilitate that with each other first.
In an age, sorry.
I just want to add on to sort of our dynamic as a team. Like, I feel like I text Amanda more than my family at this point. Like, we kind of are texting each other at all hours. It kind of feels like a startup. Like, there's really no set time when we're meeting because, like we said, these are everything we're talking about, writing about, producing for the Instagram, the creative stuff is all related to things that we care about. So it never feels like quote unquote work. It feels sort of like stuff we have to do to sort of make a difference. And I want to say that an important part of Unplug is we can't preach healing and preach sort of sharing stories and not practice that as a team. So what I've learned from, we're all under 21, so it's kind of like we're constantly like evolving and changing. And I think even with working with Amanda and Zara closely, and sometimes even with like Leah and Sarah, even though they do more of editing, is that when there's an issue or something that like we can work on, it's discussed and it's talked about in a way that like, okay, how can we get better? Because it's kind of like we're constantly growing and changing, and that's very much a part of the healing process. Is that like we have so much, just like as Black people and as a Black woman, so many things that I've conditioned to be like that I don't even know until it's like somebody finally names it for me. So even while working for the past few months with Unplug, I've learned so much about like healing and like pleasing others and all these other things that sort of we've discussed as a team that have helped me now in my personal life that I can apply to situations when I'm speaking to people. So I think that it's very important to know that we try to emulate what happens in the spaces with writing and our actual team and make sure that like people's mental health, like even me being like, hey, Amanda, maybe take a break. And she won't because it's like her life's work, but just like those messages of kind of like, we're not like at the end of the day, we care most importantly about kind of like our growth too and who we are as people more than at the end of the day, like about the numbers and the metrics and stuff like that. That kind of is like the rewarding part that comes after. So I think that is important to highlight that as well.
Aisha, tell me something. In a world where there's often pushback, a world that tells us that every single day that women don't get along, that, you know, you've got to have a male in the space. And, you know, what is this thing about celebrating Black women in any case? How does that, yeah.
I love this question. Love it. I think for me, I've worked in a lot of different places, but hands down, like working with everyone on the team and at the Unplugged Collective has been the most remarkable and rewarding because it's the first space where it's like we define our rules, like we define how we want meetings to go, we define how we're going to speak to people, how we're going to treat each other. And I think that people often get very rigid in their thinking where they feel like, okay, we need to follow what's happened in the past, but it's okay for culture to shift. It's okay to have like sort of a dynamic where the CEO isn't this like high figure that no one talks to versus the CEO is somebody who's a part of the team and can communicate with everybody. And working with Black women has been extremely rewarding because there's this sense of like, you understand me and we don't even have to say anything. Like we don't even have to reaffirm that fact. It kind of is just very natural. And kind of, I've just found that working with like women in power has been very rewarding for me because they like, I'll just speak to more like Amanda and Zara and stuff and just even them, the way they like handle things and think about things. It's really about like you as a person and making sure that like you're okay first before the business stuff. So I find that that's just kind of a trait that I've seen with working with them. And it's kind of making me realize like, okay, if I ever was to work somewhere else, this is what I sort of expect from people. Like this is the standard that I want of somebody, a workplace that cares about who I am and also my mental health. So I love that question because it's been sort of one of the most rewarding experiences to every single day, like connect with all these like incredible women. And then we just, even before this, we were just in our group chat, like texting and kind of like laughing. Like it's not always kind of like business related. And we could really just understand each other in a whole different perspective that goes beyond work. So I think that that makes our work even more powerful because we're able to step away from it too.
What is the standard? You referenced standard. What is that standard?
Does anyone, a standard of like what work should be like?
What's your standard? What's the standard of the Unplug Collective?
I can, if you want.
Please.
I think
Amanda
part
says
of like,
just to, sit back and
No,
allow the
100%.
conversation to flow. So,
I think like the standard for us, at least, like Aisha was saying, is just that Amanda and Zara have set up this great like infrastructure, this foundation for us to know that like our mental health should be prioritized in us doing this work, because like we are doing this work of amplifying stories and it's so important and so rewarding, but at the same time it also can be very emotionally exhausting when there's only 5 of us doing this work and reading these stories all the time. So I think stuff like we have a doc in our drive of like self-care things, like remember, take a breath today, like step aside. Zara does these weekly check-ins with all of us to see like what we're doing, what we're up to. And it's not just about like, what have you completed? Like, it's not just about your productivity. It's also like, how are you feeling this week? Are you emotionally exhausted? Do you need help? Are you overwhelmed? Like all this stuff, especially because like Amanda mentioned earlier, so much of our work is so multifaceted. So like all of us are dipping our hands into many different things. And sometimes, you just don't know when it's going to be too much. So just like having those weekly check-ins with Zara over text just to see if I'm okay. And that helps a ton. And then like, for example, another thing we set up just as us as editors is like, we know each other's triggers. So like, if I know this piece could be especially triggering for Leah or especially triggering for Amanda, when I'm emailing it over, I'm like, hey, like you should know this is going to talk about this. Read it when you feel like you can. And, just like allowing ourselves to grace and just to work at our own pace, I think is something that is really, really important. It's not just about like how quickly you can turn things around and how quickly you do things.
How do you balance this, which is normal people would look at this as a full-time job, and your studies? I see Aisha nodding her head. I mean, have the parents kind of pulled you to one side and, explained the fees that they're paying?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I pay nothing to go to college, which is kind of incredible. And it's kind of given me the agency and the power to just kind of do what I want. But also, I think initially there was pushback from the people around me because I was very involved in everything, and people were just saying, like, take a break, why are you doing so much? And so it was definitely something I think we all had to battle with or think about, like, how much can one really do in a day? And it's been a learning process for me. Like, I had to step away from a lot of my quote unquote college opportunities. So I was like vice president of the Caribbean Students Association, and I decided not to run again. And I've had to really focus on Unplug. But I think at the end of the day, it's, as everyone's kind of said, the most rewarding thing that I could possibly do. So I don't really feel like I'm missing out.
Does anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I can say something quickly. So related to this question, but also sort of going back a little bit to the last question, is that the beautiful thing about Unplug is not just that we're reimagining what the world can look like socially, but like down to how we operate, we're completely restructuring like what we know about productivity and what work looks like, and a 9-to-5 day, and how you're supposed to conduct yourself in a job. And then it also translates to school and making sure that you spend this amount of time on school and that you're not getting distracted and XYZ. We're really completely just restructuring everything from the root. So Sarah touched on it a lot, but we make sure that the quote unquote work experience is not something that's separated from you as a person. And we're all young, we all have limited experience in the job world. So I'm sure that older viewers watching this will know a lot more about this than even I would. But there tends to be sort of a separation between who you are at work and who you are at home. There's sort of two different personas. You can't fully be yourself. You can't really express yourself. You can't dress the way you want to dress. You can't, there's standards and limitations for who you can be in a professional setting. And, as we sort of structure this team and look to the future because I mean we do really expect this to go far. And as Amanda said, this is sort of like our life's work. So we're not going anywhere. Like this is a beginning of you guys seeing us, doing this stuff. And so as we sort of scale up to say, okay, we want to add members to the team, eventually we'll maybe have a physical office. What can that work look like? The humanity of everyone on the team completely is probably more important to how we function than just productivity, as Sarah mentioned. And I think the great thing about that is that it works. Like that's really what we're seeing, is that us checking in with each other and like having these casual conversations and making sure that everybody feels okay to express themselves, use the language that they use, come onto the calls, eating their cereal and with their hair like wacky and looking whichever way, cursing if they want to curse. Like it works because we all feel so connected to each other and the work is being done. And you can see that through the platform. Like it's grown so much. We now have, I think we've hit 35,000 followers, like not even a day or two ago. And the content that we're putting out is going far and it's reaching a lot of people. And so I think that if anything, it really speaks to the fact that this idea that we have about how work has to be structured and about who we have to be in a professional setting is not necessary. We can be ourselves and we can support each other and be friends and still get all of this stuff done in a really meaningful way.
Anybody want to add anything to that? Amanda spoke about the office that she's already seen in New York. Zara, how do you see yourself and everybody else going to work? And I mean, what kind of numbers are you eventually looking at in terms of the Unplugged Collective? Have you reached there yet? Dare to dream.
Well, I mean, we talk about it constantly, from a like theoretical standpoint, and there's so many different directions that we can take this in terms of how we want to monetize, how we want to structure the business. Like there's so much that goes into that. So right now, like we've been having a lot of conversations with mentors and potential investors and those kinds of people to really help us to think in that way, because that's something that we often don't really have access to. Just being business minded and saying, okay, this is how investment works. I don't know anything about that. Like, you have to turn to people who've had these experiences to really help you. And so we've been having so much conversation right now about how the future looks and how we're scaling up. And we're definitely not like set on anything right now. But I mean, I think, if anything has come out of this period of COVID is showing us that even just the physical space of work doesn't have to be the traditional, you go into the office at 8:30 and, set your briefcase down. And
I asked the question because I was actually surprised that Amanda spoke to the Manhattan office, as it were, because I think COVID certainly has demonstrated that yes and no. I mean, there are some of us that still love to go out and experience. Some people are quite fine sitting at home behind, in front of their computer for the whole day. So in terms of, monetizing what you do, because people watching, listening, I know since we started having conversations with you guys, the question has come up. Yeah, but how are they going to make money? How are they going to live? How are they going to feed themselves?
Well, so I can, sorry, Leah.
Sorry,
Okay, sure.
and we know your parents are feeding you right now, but how are you going to feed them, pay them back?
So I spoke to, that's really funny. I spoke to the New York office because a huge part of our magazine, which we haven't even really mentioned, is a fashion magazine. So as the people who are literally centering people who have never been on the cover of magazines before, we're talking about plus size models, we're talking about folks with disabilities, we're talking about darker skinned women, which luckily our fashion industry in Jamaica has a lot less of that problem, but globally, like magazines are whitewashed and models can only present a certain way, whether it's size, looks, features, whatever it is. And so as we've become, we literally have models who are like Unplug associated, who do a lot of our modeling for us. We have campaigns because advertisers and brands trust us to do their advertising for them. Because as you can see, like we are reimagining what the commodity is. So a lot of times in fashion, beauty is the commodity. Beauty is the thing that people are selling, right? Like how beautiful does this person look in this ad? But our generation is actually getting really tired of beauty being this kind of dysmorphic, perfectionist thing where you're watching ads of people who look absolutely nothing like you, who look absolutely nothing like anyone that you see on the streets. And they want real stories. They want people who actually have quote unquote flaws. They want to see that on their TV. They want to see that on their Instagram feed. So we actually, in the most humble way, have a lot of potential to make a lot of money. But we want to be very, very intentional about which brands we decide to promote, right? Because if we are saying like we're authentic, we're real. For example, we actually have a campaign that's launching tomorrow, it's called Dear Fashion Industry. And we're partnering with a company called Parade, who sent our models free underwear. And Parade's mission is amazing. It's about this idea that underwear can make a woman feel powerful. It's something that can make women feel like they're not one-dimensional, like they have control over their body. And so that is, of course, that makes perfect sense for a brand to work with us for that. So we're gonna have our models post. They're gonna talk about, their experience growing up in the world and how they, felt in their bodies and what they wish the fashion industry would do. And so, like, to make them feel more comfortable, essentially. And so now we have this amazing story, these people who are already used to interacting with the community in that way. So they're saying, I want to hear your story, but we're also attaching a brand to it. And so that kind of marketing is literally reimagined. It's literally a new way and also a more authentic way of advertising a product, which we can make really big bucks from. We're just not going to take money from any company.
Well, timing is everything, Amanda. And right now, the brands, the fashion brands, the big design houses, they have really kind of pulled back for the most part. Everybody's discovering the black friend that they never had or never knew they had. In fact, Rihanna pushed out first with the underwear for all size women, as it were. Being a Caribbean woman, she speaks about being thick. So, timing is good. So you are here, celebrating black women in all forms, in all sizes. So, indeed, there's an opportunity for you there to obviously generate revenue. That aside, what are your other thinkings?
Well, this is a little bit confidential, and so obviously not confidential anymore because we're on.
That's right. You've told everybody.
Everyone, but we're not going to go into detail. But we're definitely in the works of a fashion line, and as we've been reimagining the workplace. We're reimagining journalism, and we are going to reimagine what fashion looks like. Okay. I mean, it's set in stone, but when you see kind of our thinking behind what the shopping experience will be, we want to completely change what that is going to look like.
Who inspires you, Sarah? You're a content editor. Who Who inspires you? Who are your mentees out there, apart from your immediate Unplugged family?
Are we talking about favorite writers, that kind of thing?
Whichever. Musician, writer, model, fashion designer, anybody.
All right. That gives me a lot to work with. I think in terms of just reading, and I read a ton, people that I really enjoy are Roxane Gay. Ta-Nehisi Coates is one of my favorite writers. And those are the people that like I first went to when I was like 14 and trying to figure out how do you write an essay, and not in like the 5th grade, like how do you write an essay 5-paragraph kind of position, but more so like a personal narrative, which is like what we see at Unplugged. So that's like first what got me into the craft and like learning how to write those myself, and then working with other editors to make their stories come to life. I think those are the people that really inspired me in terms of that. In terms of models, fashion people, I think just brands that I see that are putting out like sustainable wear and like showcasing body sizes. You mentioned Rihanna, and like that's a huge inspiration. Like she's not, I think a lot of the content that we see in our generation is like put your money where your mouth is, and she's quite literally doing that. And has been before like it was cool or trendy. And I think that's something that is so important, like putting out makeup that fits everyone's shades and not just, you know, white people, and like putting out underwear that fits everyone and makes them feel good in their bodies is something that is so important. Even the models that she uses when she has fashion week, like you see bodies, you see skin tones ranging from all sorts of things. So I think that that is something that's really important to me, and people that I see doing the work and not just like saying, you know, Black Lives Matter or I have a Black friend too, you know, when I see the work being done, I think that's something that really inspires me.
How have you remained optimistic, Leah, about the world? When you look around you, you guys are all young, you're out there to change the world. What keeps you ticking? What makes you optimistic?
That's a good question. And there are so many different ways to look at it. What I like to think about, and what I've been thinking about so often recently, is this idea of silver linings. Because it's hard for me to come to terms with people saying, oh, COVID has been such a positive thing for me, and it has been such a positive experience. Because for so many people, it has been very difficult. And not just COVID, so many of the things that are happening in the world have been such a weight on people's shoulders. And so what helps me is not thinking necessarily that COVID is a positive at all, but always focusing on the silver linings. Even in this valley of life that you may be in, there is always something to look at and to recognize, no matter how small, no matter how much of a lining it is, it's that sun shining through the clouds, and thinking that seeing a small piece of light that can grow so massively and so quickly. I mean, Unplugged started in a dorm room, and now we have 35,000 followers. You know, that was a silver lining for me.
Yes, definitely.
And things like that is what really, it keeps me going.
Well, Aisha has to leave, so thank you, Aisha. All the best to you. Do you want to just quickly tell us about your silver lining before you leave?
I can actually stay for 30 more minutes.
Oh, great.
Too good, yeah. But I really like that question and Leah's perspective.
I loved it too, because it's always it's always gratifying for me to hear.
Yeah, I think what makes me positive about particularly this generation and kind of what I notice with people my age is that we're just thinking very differently of like the world we want to live in, and a lot of that is redefining all these things. Like Amanda keeps mentioning words like reimagine, and like what does that actually mean? And I think from ways it really excites me that I have never felt limited. I always, even like growing up with my grandparents, I didn't have the experience that's kind of like stereotypical of them wanting me to go into a career that's like very lucrative or like being a doctor and stuff. They were always kind of pushing me to do what I really enjoy. They were kind of just like, just bring money in, whatever you do, but we don't care what you do. So I think that growing up in that sort of environment has really allowed me to understand that like we are in a time where we're not going to be defined by anyone or anything, and we can truly just reimagine the world we want to live in. And if we want to go into the world of like fashion, we can. Like, I think one thing I really want to emphasize is, because we started off the conversation about healing and journalism, and now we're like speaking about fashion, but they're also very similar, because so much of the healing process is a product of, when it comes to beauty standards, is a product of the fashion industry and how people see themselves and view themselves. So we're kind of understanding that like people are very multifaceted. Nobody is one dimensional. Nobody cares about just one thing. So to limit us and to have that mentality would kind of be doing us an injustice, because everybody kind of has so many factors and layers to them. So kind of what has been a struggle for us is people being like, but no, just focus on this, or just keep your attention to one thing. But it's actually not the case. It's like, we really want to set a good foundation so that when we do decide to kind of branch into other sort of worlds, it makes sense and people don't see it as like two separate worlds. And I think that that's a power of this generation that I've been seeing a lot with like young people and young Black creatives and writers and artists, of not wanting to feel boxed in.
Aisha, here's a question from Ms. Jackson. All
Yeah.
members of the team, in fact, you can start and the others certainly can pitch in. All members of the team are under 21, I guess 21 and under, but they are consciously define hierarchy and conventional structure. So does mentorship to guide and advise them play a role, or is it of any importance? Is it of any importance to you? Mentorship.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
Conventional structure, hierarchy. Have you thrown those out of the door?
I think definitely Amanda, Zara, and everybody else can speak to this, but I will say that even though we work together and we like highlight that we're young, a lot of my mentors are women who are older than 40. And it's kind of this intergenerational approach of like, you can learn, there's always kind of like, you learn a lot from the people who are older than you, but you could actually learn a lot from the people who are your age. So when I say kind of like we're redefining this new world, it's not completely like, oh, mentorship or people who are older us don't matter. It's very much, we can definitely learn from them and they have been helping us, but it's also like we're learning from each other. And I know that everybody definitely has a lot to say on this, so I can pass it.
Okay, thank you. Leah, your thoughts?
Sure, yes. I mean, mentorship is so important to me, and to the whole team. And it's been very clear. Whenever we have team meetings, Amanda talks about each of us, what we bring to the table and what expertise we have. I mean, we have had workshops just with the 5 of us in our team meeting, and it's one of us starting off and saying, okay, yes, I have expertise in this area. I have experience in this area. I have all the mentors in this area. And so I'm going to spend the next 15, 20, 30 minutes speaking to the rest of the team, speaking to you guys about what that means, what I bring to the table, and how we can all be lifted up in that manner.
Okay.
Yeah. As well,
Sarah, what would you like to add?
So, I think it's interesting mentioning the word hierarchy, just because I think that we're raised to see older people as being above us in a certain way, and demanding of respect, which is definitely, not untrue. But something that's been really important for us in talking to mentors and establishing these relationships with a lot of older women is that sense of hierarchy is not there. We obviously afford them a certain level of respect, but the conversation isn't like, parent to child or older person to younger person. I know it's all, let me impart my wisdom. It's very conversational, and most of the women that we've spoken to have very clearly acknowledged the fact that they also have a lot to learn from us, just as we have a lot to learn from them. We have different, wisdom that we can share with each other. And that's been really, really important for us in, establishing ourselves and in feeling that confidence, because we've had multiple experiences of having to approach older women in their 30s, 40s, 50s to say, this is how we feel. This is our stance on something. We've run into some issues with other companies and stuff, and like having to address those things and being very sort of upfront and explicit, it's really intimidating because you're talking to people who are older than you and who have been in the business. And so as young people, it's can be hard to feel like you even have a right to express yourself in that way and to say, you know, we might be young, but we're still a force, and we're still gonna be very honest and upfront in the way that we feel about things. And it has done nothing but help us and like serve the relationships that we've built, because like one of the very first like issues that we ran into, we addressed it like right away with the company. And now, you know, after having that conversation and after establishing that sort of energy of, you know, we are here and we're going to be respected, that person has actually become one of our biggest mentors and is super helpful to us and is very real and honest with us about everything. And so I think it's an important thing to really like drive in, because this idea of hierarchy, I think, often gets in the way of these like organic relationships building. And so in chasing after these partnerships and in chasing after building these relationships and knowing within ourselves that we're not going to approach other people as, you know, the lower person in the hierarchy, we're coming in it as equals, has like been amazing in terms of like all of the relationships that we've been able to build. I mean, we have older women, you know, in their 40s and 50s in our corner, and you know, we have text groups with them and people saying, you know, we're here to help you. What can we do? We, you know, if you need advice about anything, like we're here to support you. So it just kind of goes into the whole reimagining thing. It's like we're really just like ripping the whole thing apart. You know, we can have these relationships with older people that are very, you know, we're really coming into it on an even plane. We can help each other and serve each other equally. So that's been really important for us, for sure.
Sarah, what's your take on this?
I think just echoing what everyone has said is just like, it's really important for us to get a diverse amount of opinions, just trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Sometimes I get posts for drafts that we need to work on, and I show my mom and I'm like, hey, like, what do you think of this? Is this clear? Do you understand everything that's being communicated? Or ask my sister who's younger than me. So I think things like that are like super important, or ask older friends. And I think Amanda might want to talk a little bit more about like the mentorship programs that we've been a part of with older women. But I think like definitely knowing that we aren't the experts, and part of reimagining is also learning what works. Like before we had a huge following, like we were just testing out our feet. We were just trying to see what works, what looks good. How do we distill really complicated information to a larger community? And it's just like, we're not going to get it perfect. We are all, like we said, college students under 21. We are doing this full time basically, but it's not a job really. So I think like just figuring out what works and learning from people around us has been really important and like to our experience. But Amanda, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
What is your, before we go to Amanda, Sarah, what's your definition of the word fail?
Oh, I think if you have asked that question a couple years ago, it probably would have been something like, if I get below a B+ average in school, I'm a failure. You know, like I think us as Black women, or just like even most being raised Caribbean, or like Aisha being West African, we come from this culture of like, you know, do well in school and that's how you define success, and like be a career person and like be a doctor or a lawyer, and that's like how you know you've been successful. So I think like, especially working with Unplug and also just like my own learning over the past couple of years, it's just been this process of knowing that like you doing this much today is good enough. You know, you getting this done, like that you really needed to edit this piece, and like you're doing that today. If you're not editing 6,000 pieces today, that's also okay. Like I think something I said earlier is just like giving yourself grace and knowing that like it's okay to just like do what you have to do and accept that you can only do it so much. There's only so many hours in the day, and I think we're all learning that as we go.
Thank you. Amanda, you spoke about going to the pressure of being at an Ivy League university and not having a voice. In fact, it's what made you want to amplify not only your voice, but the voices of others. Coming from a Caribbean background, as Zara made mention of it, where success is defined, lawyer, doctor, everybody's an aunt over a certain age. You know, sometimes, for heaven's sakes, you're seen and not heard. Tell us, go back a bit to that experience at Ivy League. A Caribbean woman wanted to amplify your voice.
I mean, I think kind of where it starts for me is like as a Caribbean woman growing up, being a Caribbean woman, like I think people don't give as much recognition to the fact that Jamaica is a matriarchal society in many ways. Like we're one of the first countries in the world to have a woman as the prime minister. And we have so many women. I think we're like number 3 in the world for women in managerial roles, the highest percentage. So I think it's really complex because at the same time, even these women who are in these high positions are still experiencing discrimination. We're not going to cancel that out. But in terms of how I could aspire and like how far I could dream, there was no limitation at all, right? So I was in a space where it was very male dominated. This didn't just start in college. In high school, I was one of the only women and one of the only Black women in every high level class in the school. I just couldn't understand it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. That is not what it's like at UWI at all. I watched both my parents go to law school. I watched my mom go to law school when I was 10 years old. So this idea of aspiration and dreaming big and just going for what you want as a woman, that has never been a question for me as a Caribbean person, right? So I, saw a male-dominated space, and it's not anything to do with men. Like, I'm sure as individuals, they all have great qualities about them, but it was about the fact that the women that I was around who were equally as capable were being silenced and kind of pushed off to the side, and I was like, for what reason?
Here's a question for you. And Amanda, you can perhaps answer this. Donna Chinloy speaks to your powerful initiative, Generation Z now leading, blowing stereotypes out of the water, imperfection, new perfection. How are you leading others? How are you leading yourselves, family and community? You did speak a little bit about it earlier, but how are you involving yourself in family first, yourselves, family and community?
I can speak quickly to this. I think that, again, we've been talking very broadly about healing, but it's really important to note that just by taking the time to try and understand my childhood and to try and understand, why I felt certain things, it has strengthened my relationships with my family tenfold. Because, just being honest, like growing up, I think my mom always used to tell me, when you're older, you'll understand. You'll understand why I did certain things. And that's just a very common Jamaican thing. Like, and so generally, I think when people reach around 18, 19, 20, they start to think about the decisions that their parents made in raising them. And you can either, process that and try to learn from it or hold on to it and, to make it turn into something that hasn't been kind of explored. So whether that's positive or negative, I think healing and like being in this healing environment has allowed me to really think about like generational trauma or just the positive parts of my upbringing and like holding space for those things in my daily life, being more thankful for my family, being more thankful for my friends, and just like valuing people more than just like what their career is or like what their opinions are. Like, who are you as a person and how can I help? How can our relationships, our friendships help each other grow as well?
Would anybody else like to weigh in on that in terms of family, community, yourselves?
No, I mean, my family is always very interested in what I'm doing. I'm the first daughter, the first granddaughter on my father's side, and so my family's always very excited about what I'm doing. And bringing it back to those dinner table conversations, people will be asking on the family Zoom call on a Sunday, so what are you doing, Leah? And because so much of my time is spent doing Unplug, that starts our conversation about what Unplug is, about the message of Unplug. And it gets us talking as a family about how we have reflected some of the mission of Unplug in our own lives, in our own relationships. And that's the goal. That's what we want. We want to be able to go back to our families and say, this is what I've learned through this experience. And we hope that other people who are experiencing our community, not just the 5 of us, also have that experience as well.
Leah, what's your wildest dream for Unplug? You, Leah. Sitting in front of us as a copy editor, what's your wildest dream?
Well, I love to write and I love to edit. Once I got to college and saw the wealth of information there was and the wealth of courses I could take, I began to take as many courses as I possibly could on writing, on storytelling, on editing, on what it means to be an editor in a collaborative space. And taking these courses, I was looking for what's the next step? Where do I go from here? How can I share what I've learned with the world? And so, of course, I spent lots and lots of time, sent so many applications, to be an editor, to work in certain magazines, all the while also working with Amanda on Unplug, and spending so much of my time on it. And then all of a sudden, it kind of dawns on you in this really unexpected way. These jobs you're applying to, there are now people applying to work with Unplug. There are people who would like to be in the position that you are in. And so I guess in terms of dreams, my dream would be, to be on the other side of that application, all those applications that I was sending out, to be able to pass on this expertise that I'm developing and growing in the courses I've taken and in the experience with Unplug, and to be able to pass it on, to pay it forward, to mentor someone else, just like my mentors have mentored me throughout the past few years.
Thank you. That question was from Mandy Wagnack. Would anybody else like to share their wildest dream for Unplug? What's your wildest dream?
I can go. I want to shout out Mandy real quick. She's our friend from school. She lives with us. I think that, at least for me, I sort of see Unplug as something that is going to, and this, everyone says this, so maybe it sounds dramatic, but I really mean it, that it's going to change the world. Even just being able to represent people that, aren't usually seen in fashion, for example, with the campaign that we're doing this week, is huge. We're pushing out content that is teaching people things that no one talks about, that just hasn't really been discussed before. We recently had a post about the BMI and, sort of deconstructing what is the BMI and why is it BS? And so many people were in the comments like, wow, I just didn't know this information. Thank you for sharing this. This sort of completely changed my outlook on, XYZ topic. And in terms of the reach that we can have, the business structure and the, how we're going to monetize and that stuff, those are just final details. But the big picture really is that through this, we're educating and we're really changing the way that people see themselves, and giving people the tools to see themselves and speak about themselves and each other in a different way from everything that we've been taught. And that work of reimagining is now sort of being extended to our community. And so, in terms of how, when I think of Unplug in its final stages, there are no final stages, because it continues to grow and to push against boundaries and to consistently just like change everything that we know about fashion, about bodies, about who we are as women, about gender in general, about everything. And like, I think that through producing this content and pushing this information and providing this representation, we're really sort of opening up people's minds to what's possible. And we've already seen like so many people come to us and say, you inspired me to do this, you inspired me to write this, you inspired me to start this initiative. So already, after a year and a half of this platform being started, the ripple effect is really showing.
But in an age, Zara, where you're told that your generation don't read, Instagram is nice because you can just press like. You don't have to think. And I'm hearing from you and Amanda, education, writing from Leah, writing, copy editing, content editing from Sarah. What's going on? Have we missed something?
I think so. Yeah. I think that people definitely have this view of our generation of, we're so obsessed with our phones and we're so, out of touch from the world, and, kids grow up on the iPad and they don't play outside. And, there's validity to that. It's something to be, that's something to be discussed. But at the same time, I think the fact that we're seeing the amount of change that we're seeing right now, and it's coinciding with the rise of social media, is not a coincidence, right? Like, social media allows information to be accessible like that. I mean, the internet in general, but social media sort of gives us this way to share with each other and to see the humanity of other people without having to meet them, right? And even though on one hand you might say, oh, well, it's superficial and you're not really getting to know people and you're just kind of swiping through and tapping and liking, the reality is that we're humans and we seek those connections with other people regardless. And so, Unplug is proof that you can still do that through social media, and people are still seeking those connections. It's just, it's true that maybe it's harder to make them in person, but regardless, like, people are still seeking this information, and it's allowing us to completely reinvent how information can be shared and how people learn. Because, traditionally it's just, you go to school, you sit down at a desk and a teacher tells you something and you write it down in your book, and you go home and you read it again in your book, and then you write it down on the test. And then what? Like, where does that information go? How does that inform who you are as a person? And with social media now, all of a sudden, there are no restrictions. You don't have to sit down and be quiet and wear a uniform. You're just, in your house in the most vulnerable state. And you can share those things in a much more real way. And so the education now goes past just sharing info. It's really humanizing where the information comes from and like how we can learn from each other as people, and not just, as like disseminating.
And also challenging the information that's put out there as well. Tell me something, Amanda, here's a question for you. Is there a confidential or anonymity policy in place to protect these vulnerable storytellers? Leah is nodding. She's a copy editor. She's nodding. Do you want to take that then, Leah?
Sure. I know Aisha has to go, so I want Aisha to quickly jump in with what her dream for Unplugged, and then we can talk about Anna.
I have to go to work, so I'm not leaving to do nothing. But thank you. This has been incredible, honestly. I think that we were all really nervous, but as soon as we started talking, I feel really inspired. And this is our first team panel. So thank you, the Jamaica Observer, for honestly putting this together. And kind of quickly for my dream, it would have to be, I have no doubt that we'll go on to do really big and amazing things, but I think the most important part is to stay grounded in the healing aspect of it all. Because once you get bigger, it's easy for that to get lost. Like with the comments, we need 5 people in the comments, so many people are talking and sharing their experiences and saying things, and there's just a lot of more pressure. But I think that the biggest dream would definitely be to infiltrate sort of these spaces that are like wellness and fashion and journalism and truly kind of reimagine all of them and make it so it's like we set that standard or a new standard. And a lot of what's happening right now with all these movements, whether it's the Me Too happening in Jamaica or sort of what's happening in America here with police brutality, is that people feel like there should be a shift and things and like old systems are right now kind of being disrupted. So I think that this is the perfect time, honestly, to seek out that change and to reimagine this new world because people are tired of kind of what already is existing. So thank you. Bye.
Okay, take care. Leah, can we go back to you? Read the confidential or anonymity policy in place to protect these vulnerable storytellers. That's from Durangela.
Yes, so it has always been so important to us to guarantee anonymity for folks who are still afraid to share their stories and to share with such a big and growing audience. You know, we accept anonymous stories, we always have, and we emphasize to the reader, to the writer, that when they are talking to the editor, this is a me and you conversation. This is a conversation that nobody else will hear, no one else will hear about, because we are working on telling your story in the most compassionate, the realest way possible, and we are going to then go on and share it with folks, separating your name, but allowing your story to carry through in such a way that others can hear it, others can feel it, others can experience it without you needing to be in the spotlight.
Thank you. Amanda, tell us about the Unplugged Collective. How did you come up with the name?
I'm a musician, but I play guitar and I sing, which is like something completely different. And so I love watching Unplugged series where it's just singing and the guitar. That's like my favorite thing in the world. And there's something that's so like raw and vulnerable about stripping away the music and just having the person be at the center of that music session. And so when the page originally started, we didn't have a solid name yet, but there was a name for the blog that was called Body Unplugged. And so when we decided that we wanted to transition into a bigger publication, because this did just start as kind of like a blog page. I saw lots of people doing blog pages where they would write about their own experiences, like they would have travel blogs or whatever, and I didn't know how to make a website. I just knew like if I had the blog format, I could post people's stories. It worked, but then at a certain point I was like, we need an official website. And so when we did, the name Unplugged really stuck. And what's really funny, everyone calls it Unplugged with like a GGED. And I'm just like, it's not unplugged because that's kind of like past tense. Like we're always unplugging, we're always growing, we're always changing. So just a little side note, the Unplugged Collective.
The Unplugged Collective. Here's a question for you, Amanda. Don't disappear yet. From Ms. Jackson again. Many startups are approached to be purchased when their potential success is apparent. Is selling Unplugged something you would consider at a future point in time? Don't be too quick to say no. Zara, it depends on the price, right?
Well, you know what? Zara is the business person. She's the like business-minded person. And Zara and I, as she said, we've been friends for so long, like very, very, very close friends. So it's the best part about this is that like she is my go-to in terms of business decisions. And I know right now, I don't know what the right decision would be, but I have a very strong intuition, and so does Zara, and so does really everyone on the team. So if I 5 years from now, 2 years from now, go to Zara and say, do you think the right decision is to sell Unplugged? And she says no, then the answer is no. And she says yes, and the answer is yes. So I just think, I love the idea that we have each other's back and we have each other's support through this. In terms of whether or not we would sell it right now, we don't know the future.
Fair enough. The team, this is from I'm not too sure how her first name is pronounced, Kesia Taylor. The team speaks highly to imagination. How important is it to build imagination in children and as you develop? What do you believe was the activity or event that you did as a child that created this imagination for you? I think we can start with you, Amanda, and work that question around. That's a lovely question. The team speaks highly to imagination. How important is it to build imagination in children?
That is a very good question, Mom.
Oh my God, it's your mom. Hi, Mom. Okay, be nice to your mother. At what point, what was it that she hit you with to instill this brilliant imagination?
No, I mean, my mom deserves 100%.
Is it Kesia or Kesia? Her? Kesia.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, my mom deserves all the shout out and support in the world. I think her work ethic and also the way that she raised me is really what taught me how to relate to other women. It's really what inspires me to want to help other women heal because of how healing she is in her existence. And even when it comes down to like instilling confidence in women, my mom was so, it was her entire priority for me to be a child with confidence, a child with imagination. So speaking to the activities, I used to be an actor, a child actor, I guess, in Alice Hogarth's productions. And Alice Hogarth is this wonderful, wonderful woman who runs Wonderland Productions, and she creates these amazing, plays that already exist. So, for example, she took Pirates of the Caribbean and she rewrote the script to have a Jamaican setting. And so I think I played like one of the pirates or something. I was like the main, I was a tour guide. And so the tour guide wasn't even a part of Pirates of the Caribbean, but I think Alice Hogarth herself was reimagining what acting could look like, was reimagining the script. And so, you know what, like I can definitely attribute a lot of this idea to, seeing something as it is and reimagining it to be a space that prioritizes your story to that experience.
Thank you. Can we hear from Leah and Zara and Sarah? Leah, we'll share, Amanda Taylor's mum's question.
Well, raising a child to have imagination and to dream big is so important. And when growing up, I mean, I know all I thought about is writing, but growing up, my mommy would read to me all the time until I could do it myself, and then I was to be reading to her, fostering that sense of showing kids other stories, other people's stories to give them perspective, and then to give them their own perspectives, to see themselves reflected in stories so that they know they're not alone, so that they know they're not navigating this world by themselves. It's a diversity of stories, of books, of TV, of movies, all of them in media and social media. It's so important to show children both their faces and the faces of others, so that as they grow up, they can want to be in spaces where everyone is represented.
Thank you, Sarah D'Souza.
I think Leah and I are kind of on the same track with writing and reading. So similarly, like my parents really read to me and like fostered that. So like I remember my grandpa used to give me a ton of Nancy Drew books. So I would read all of those. And then I started writing my own because I think like when I was growing up, and I think when we were all growing up, like the amount of like literature showing Black and brown women or Black and brown people like was just so limited to like negative, like historical experiences. So I just like kind of took Nancy Drew and I made her Black and I had her brown best friend and they were just going all over the town solving crimes. And like that was a way that I expressed myself. And if my like parents and my grandparents like didn't encourage writing and reading in me and like seeing a place for myself in the world, I think that wouldn't have happened. So I think that's really, really important.
Thank you. Zara.
I actually love this question because I think that with children, basically, I'm going to kind of take a more philosophical approach to this question. It's fine, but the world sort of beats you down and like beats you into shape, right? And tells you who you should be, who you're supposed to be. Um, and with kids, I think there's a lot of fear in raising children, and being afraid of failing as a parent, and raising a kid to not adhere to certain standards, and how are they going to end up. And so you sort of, we see through a lot of the stories that come in that parents oftentimes are the first place of people's trauma, of saying, my mom always felt this way about me and always felt the need to comment about X, or my parents never accepted my sexuality, and didn't make me feel like it was possible for me to be whoever. And so I think that it's a really important question, because we sort of look at raising kids as, okay, how can I raise my kid to be quote unquote successful, right? But even people who say go on to have a good job and make money and get good grades in school oftentimes are unhappy and don't really know who they are until later in life, if ever, don't really find themselves, and end up continuing that cycle of enforcing those rules and sort of beating their kids into shape. And then you sort of just end up with a society full of people who aren't really being true to themselves, and there's so much that comes with that. And so I think that it's important to see raising kids, I think, as an opportunity to rewrite the story and to look at what has come before you, not in a negative light, but to say, okay, these are the behaviors that I know sort of negatively affected me. How can I actually break that? And how can I make sure that I am raising my child in a way that I'm not beating them into shape? I'm sort of letting them grow into whoever they are. And I think that is really the solution to allowing kids to be imaginative, not just about the world, but about themselves, and not making, from the start, not making kids feel like they have to conform to a certain ideal, and just allowing them to be who they are and explore that in whatever that looks like. And as a parent, if certain things make you uncomfortable, recognizing the fact that that's not an issue with your kid, that's an issue with the way that you have internalized how you're supposed to be. So how do you then not impart that on your child and really allow them to be that imaginative person and be who they want to be?
I had asked Sarah earlier, Zara, of her definition of fail. Allow me to ask you, what's your definition of success?
Okay, that's a really good question as well. I think my personal definition of success really has nothing to do with your environment, and more about your relationship with yourself. Because as I said, you can be a billionaire, and be able to do whatever you want. And a lot of people look at you and say, well, how did you become successful? But if you are unhappy, and if you, have no inner connection with who you are, then what's the point? You sort of move through life, you have all of this money, you die, and then what? Like, what are you leaving behind? What is your story? What is the relationship that you built with yourself over that time? And so to me, success isn't, how can I go on to get this fantastic job and make all of this money and like be, have all of this power. It's how can I come to the healthiest point in my relationship with myself, and then from getting to that point in yourself, you can now sort of share that with other people. And like, what to me success is leaving a positive footprint in the world, because everybody's gonna come and go, the world is gonna move on, and regardless of whether or not your name and your status is retained in history, it doesn't really matter if the impact that you're having is positive and ultimately is sort of shaping the world and helping people. So to me, I think that define success much more than, any dollar value could.
What's your definition of success, Leah?
I also love that question. It's great because it really causes you to stop and pause and think, what is self-actualization for me? What does it mean to be successful? And I think that absolutely goes hand in hand with failure. Success is being able to take failure and to learn from it and to embrace the whatever it was that caused you to fail, embrace it in such a way that you can manipulate it and change it into what causes you to take one more step further, to climb one rung higher on this ladder of self-actualization, is to embrace failure in such a way that you don't run from it, because that's when you achieve true failure, is running away from the places in which you failed as opposed to facing them. So success to me, facing that and moving forward.
Thank you. Amanda?
My definition of success?
Yes.
I think my definition of success is learning to prioritize the voice in your head that knows more than you think it does. I think that we all have an intuition and we all have a very strong gut feeling that tells us what's next, that tells us, this is right or this is wrong, that tells us, I don't really feel comfortable in this space. And so that's something that I'm trying to build every single day. I mean, my definition of success has nothing to do with like what my career is, or, I mean, of course, at the back of my head, I'm like, how am I gonna, make money? But ultimately, I think that once you're able to, I really believe that, the world is, or not the world, but from a spiritual perspective, I believe like everyone has the ability to tap into something much deeper that will allow them to progress into a path that is for them.
Yeah.
I think something as simple as like sharing and naming and saying out loud, like, I want Unplugged to be at Fashion Week. And we're gonna look back at this webinar and we're gonna say, we said, on this date in 2020 that Unplugged was gonna be at Fashion Week. And then we're gonna be at Fashion Week, because I think that is something that we've tapped into, that we know that it's coming from a place of boundless love. It's not coming from a place of, oh, this is gonna make us more successful or impressive. It's like, no, we want to shift what Fashion Week even looks like. And because of, I think, the intention, because of listening to that inner voice, I know it will happen. And so that's kind of what success is for me.
Thank you. I actually hope that I will be invited to the Unplug Collective fashion show as opposed to the typical Fashion Week. Here's a question from Cavell Gordon. As a diverse group of young women, how would you handle a situation where your intuitions do not coincide? You see, Mr. Gordon, us women have the same.
I think that's a really good question.
Yes.
That tends to not happen, at least after. We do disagree. We do disagree on things for sure, all the time.
Are you sure? Because it just seems so harmonious, kumbaya, hands together. You disagree? Oh my God.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's great is that the sort of precedent that we've set for communication is so strong. So if there's any disagreement about stuff, like it's so natural to talk about it, and it's never like a personal thing. And I think usually once we sort of discuss things, we sort of tend to all end up being on the same page, because everyone on the team has so much wisdom and like has really good points to share. And so, once we sort of reason things out with each other, we tend to sort of converge on an answer. All the time I'll be like, I don't know about this. Like, explain, like, what is your reasoning? And then I'm gonna be like, this is my reasoning. I'm gonna be like, okay, moving on, next. Like, that makes sense. And so, the intuition sort of kind of comes in first, and then we have discussion. But at the end of the day, especially with major decisions, like we tend to be feeling the same things. And if we don't, like we just communicate about it, and then it's like never an issue. Like we always sort of, you know, even if like we end up on a decision that maybe say I suggested something else and I at first disagreed with it, I might not end up being like, okay, I'm 100% down, like let's go, this is my favorite thing. But it doesn't matter because I also trust the people on my team. So if I'm having a discussion with Amanda and Aisha, and you know they sort of have a similar opinion about something, then I really do trust them a lot. And so it's not hard for me or anyone else on the team to say, okay, you know, I hear what you guys are saying, like that's fair enough. I'll take a step back and we'll just work on it together, and let's just keep moving forward and, you know, see where it goes.
Amanda, how difficult is it for you, the CEO and founder of the Unplug Collective, to step away and listen to others?
It is, because I initially didn't even see myself as a CEO. Like, it was the people on the team who were like, Amanda, you're doing 700 things right now. Please be the CEO and please let us help you. And so it's less so about like it being hard to listen to them, because I love, like, we have literally sometimes set timers in our meetings to say like, let's make sure everyone is speaking so we can hear everyone's voice. Yeah. But it's not like not wanting to listen. It's more about not wanting to ask for help, because that's literally how women are raised, to just do everything. True. And to not ask. So it's guilty. It's been like a really big learning for me to step back and say, okay, it's okay, you can help me.
Thank you. Norma Williams doesn't have a question, she has a comment. I agree, Norma. I don't have a question, says Norma Williams, just a comment on how amazing these women are. I am blown away. The world will be okay. I absolutely share those sentiments, Norma. The world will be blown away. But what do you want? I listened to Zara carefully speaking about, you know, what's the use being a billionaire? And, you know, when all is said and done, you have absolutely nothing. Well, during COVID, obviously, it's not good to be a billionaire, but you can shop online, but the shopping experience is not quite the same. But what ultimately, the Unplug Collective, a celebration of Black women and non-binary people at their realest, what do you want your legacy to be, Aaliyah? Leah James, copy editor. When all is said and done, when Amanda gets the right price for the Unplug Collective, what do you want your legacy to be?
The question of legacy can often draw out many cliches, because deep down I feel like so many people just want the same thing, is to be remembered. But beyond being remembered, legacy to me means that somebody was changed. You know, that somebody sends me a message and says, because of you, I wrote a poem that allowed me to think about an experience I had in a completely different way. That poem will always exist. Years later, the screenshots of the very first time we crossed a benchmark, we got 1,000 followers. That's a legacy that will always exist. People always talk about the fact that the internet is forever. You know, that moment that the Unplug Collective is no longer this group of 5 20-year-olds with a dream. You know, the legacy for me will be the moment somebody can say, I was changed. I mean, we have a legacy because these 4 women have changed me. And that's their legacy. If they have changed nobody else, they've changed me. And that is massive for me. And if I can do that for even one of them, that's huge.
Wow. Sarah D'Souza, what do you hope your legacy to be?
I think Leah's getting us all a little weepy over here. But I think definitely something my mom always says is like, she doesn't care what I do in life, but as long as I'm happy. So I think like happiness is definitely key. And like Leah said, like just knowing that you've changed someone and that you've contributed to society and like the greater good, as cliche as it sounds, in any way. Like even just working with all the writers, the incredible writers that I've been able to have been so brave to share their stories. Like that in itself just means so much to me, knowing that like I contributed even if in the smallest way in helping them tell their story. And just like knowing that putting it out there, they've been uplifted by the amazing community we've been able to create online. So I think like that definitely for me would be like the be all end all when it's all said and done.
Okay. Time is not on our side. What have you learned about each of you? What have each of you learned about each other? I mean, I love the fact that Amanda said that she has a timer to allow other people to bring their thoughts to the table. Amanda, what have you each learned about one another? What, for example, Amanda, have you learned about Leah? One person, because we know that you know Zara. So what have you learned about Leah? And I'll ask Leah the same question about you.
I mean, Leah's incredible. Leah is just, I genuinely don't have the words for how incredible Leah is. Something that we do in the morning is when we're doing the captioning for the Instagram, which you guys should all follow at the Unplugged Collective on Instagram. When we're doing those captions, she is able to take my thoughts that are so long and kind of jumbled up and make it into something really concise. She's just extremely analytical, extremely good at taking these big ideas, and she's a less is more kind of person. So she'll say something small, but it will mean the most in the room.
Thank you. And Leah, what has Amanda taught you?
That's so sweet. I'd like to say I've known Amanda for a long time, but the level with which we know each other now is far beyond what either of us could have imagined when we were 4 years old learning to play the xylophone together. But I'd say what I've learned from Amanda is that when you find what your purpose is, when you find really what you are here to do, nothing will be able to stop you. You'll have so many things to overcome. But I mean, Amanda has always been someone with, I guess, what people would call the entrepreneurial spirit. But nothing that Amanda has done has even begun to compare with the massive impact that she's had by just holding on to this dream that she really, really believes in and taking it further than I think I would have dared to dream before seeing it come to life before my eyes. So Amanda has really taught me how to dream and how to follow through on that dream in a way that you just do not take no for an answer. You have your dream and you dream it as big as you possibly can, and nobody's going to be able to get in the way of that.
Zara, what has Sarah taught you?
I think that, Sarah is incredible. Really, like, through this, I've learned so much about the importance of teamwork, and particularly from Sarah, who's someone who's always willing to say, I'm willing to help out with this. How can I support you? How can I, sort of lend my hand? And I think it definitely has taught me so much about, what does it mean to really be a part of a team and show up for people and say, I'm here and I'm ready to sort of support you, and like trying to sort of emulate that back, and not just, be a firm voice, but to keep that energy and reciprocate that of like, how are you? How are you feeling? We're here to be there for each other. And so I'm like looking down into the corner at Sarah when I'm talking. Like, definitely, I've learned so much about that. And I mean, Sarah's just like, in terms of the dreams and the ideas that she has and like following through with everything, like Sarah's amazing. So,
Sarah, what have you learnt? Or what has Zara taught you?
Zara is truly one of the most compassionate people I've ever met. Like, I think she's taught me, especially like, if you're authentic to what the vision is, like the message will come through. And especially when we're doing this work, like that is something that is so extremely important, especially when we've like blown up in the past month. Like that is something that we need to be reminded of. And like, we need to remember like the community is what we're doing this work for. And like, she is constantly reminding us of that. And it's so amazing to see how much she really cares about the community, about the people that we're doing this work for, about each of us. Like I mentioned earlier, she does those weekly check-ins and she's always like, how are you doing? What are you up to? Are you feeling really stressed? Are you feeling really overwhelmed? And like, that is something that when she's such an authentic person that it just comes so naturally to her that like, it means so much to all of us, and being able to hold the team together. Like, I definitely think she makes such an impact.
Thank you very much.
Oh, quickly. I just want to also shout out Aisha, because obviously she's not here on the call.
Yes.
Aisha is amazing. She's the most recent addition to our team, and she's like totally just like taken everything that we've been doing and just like gone so far with it in terms of how she, her vision. She helps us with everything. She's so on the ball, and is always ready to give ideas, to communicate with people. Like Aisha has taught me a lot, honestly. Like in terms of she's just a go-getter, like all just on the ball. And I'm not like that. Like I'm sort of more laid back. So I think, just seeing her doing what she does and what she's passionate about is also really, really inspiring. And I just want to make sure that she also has her moments in this, because I know that she has to leave and go to work, but she's, an amazing person to work with.
Take 5 women: Amanda Taylor, Zara Harding, Aisha Sheriff, Sarah D'Souza, and Leah James. The Unplugged Collective. This is each and every one of these webinars have been absolutely mind-boggling, inspiring. It leaves you, wanted to press rewind and kind of look at what you're doing. You 5 women under 21, bloody hell. Just when we thought, Amanda, that we'd seen it all and heard it all. Talk about a flotilla of energy. I would like to thank you all, the Unplugged Collective. That's you, Amanda Taylor, Zara Harding, Aisha Sheriff, Sarah D'Souza, Leah James, for sharing with us this morning. 2 hours of really literally just flown, and I could sit here. I got instructions from Amanda yesterday. Well, if you just sit back, we'll do the talking. I didn't expect to do this much talking, to tell the truth, Amanda, but I'm glad that I was able to. I'd like to thank you all. We can't wait. I cannot wait to see what you 5 women will do. Not 5 years from now, but 5 months from now. Notice I said not 5 years from now, but 5 months from now. June has been your special month. You have really blown up. Keep blowing up and keep sharing, of course, with the Jamaica Observer. We look forward to our next webinar series. I'd like to thank Sagicor, Digicel, and Carreras, the amazing Jamaica Observer team, of course. Natalie Chin has promised to share some of the medication with me. The genius guys at Phase 3. Thank you very, very much, guys. Shakima Hines, who has made my table beautiful every single week, and she even found this gorgeous orchid for me from Best Buzz, I think. And thank you all to our viewers, of course, for sharing. We press pause. We're going to go on a brief vacation. Oh my God, it's so well deserved. All right, guys? And we'll be back, I think, on July the 28th with a lot more exciting conversations to share. So, thank you very much. Again, thanks to our sponsors, Sagicor, Digicel, and Carreras Limited. Thank you. Bye.
Sagicor e-Advantage, bank with ease, as you please, like a breeze, pay no fees, rain or shine, save your time, it's so fine when you bank online.
Finally, there's a savings account that meets your need for speed and ease. Sagicor Bank e-Advantage, bank online, no monthly fees, unlimited, free Sagicor Bank ABM withdrawals, interest on your money. Sagicor Bank e-Advantage.
It's so fine when you bank online.
Open your Sagicor Bank e-Advantage account today.